I want to start this off by saying that if you find the art style for this game off-putting or think it looks like it's specifically made for young kids, do not be fooled like I almost was, and trust me when I say Penny's Big Breakaway is a best-in-class 3D platformer. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Bonsai Boy, but my friends call me Bon, and today I'd like to talk about the newest game from the people who made Sonic Mania, and one that I believe sets a new standard for 3D platformers, Penny's Big Breakaway. This game has been an absolute joy to play, and despite not personally vibing with the art style myself, it has single-handedly revived my interest in a genre I'd long grown tired of. But before we get to the gameplay and all the praise I have for it, let's talk about some boilerplate stuff like the performance and presentation. I played Penny's Big Breakaway. Okay, small aside, but that title is a mouthful, so I'm going to call it Penny's going forward. Anyway, I played Penny's on PS5, and as for the performance, I found that the game maintained a very stable 60 FPS and felt smooth to play throughout. I only encountered a handful of minor bugs, and one less minor issue with a boss fight that broke and required me to retry. Other than that, it was perfectly stable and ran great. However, I do have one complaint here, and it has to do with this strange dithering effect that gets smeared over the environment and objects at a distance. I don't know if this is a stylistic choice or a means of circumventing technical limitations, but it brings down the otherwise cartoony and rounded aesthetic. Moving on to the art style and graphics, I want to make it clear that even if some of this didn't work for me, art style is one of the most subjective elements of a game, and it ultimately didn't bring down my overall enjoyment. Now, starting with the graphics, unfortunately character models and the world both have what to me feels like a flat and plasticky look that I think does a disservice to the cute characters and great level design. I suspect the game was first developed for Switch and then ported to other platforms during development because the visual presentation is really the only thing here that I found somewhat lacking. But it would make sense if that were the result of developing a game that can run decently on Nintendo's dated hardware. As for the art style, I have to be upfront and say I was honestly hesitant to pick the game up as it seemed to lean past cute and colorful towards being a little infantile. I find this even stranger after having played and beaten the game because it's quite challenging and definitely more of an all-ages presentation than the box art or cutscene illustrations would lead you to believe. As for the writing and plot, there's not a lot here, and by extension I don't have a lot to say. It's not a criticism, as I'm glad the story is unobtrusive and the game is quick to let you hop into the action. It's still kid-friendly, but having said that, I found it charming, fun, and even a little satirical at times. So with all that out of the way, if you're like me and on the fence because of the game's presentation, then stick around because that's basically the end of any criticism I have for this fantastic 3D platformer. One last stop before we get to the gameplay, I have to talk about the sound design because it's honestly quite amazing. All of the sound effects are wonderfully whimsical and perfectly lend themselves to a satisfying sense of speed and rhythm. The winding and buzzing sounds of Penny's yo-yo are so good, and the sound of it rolling across different surfaces makes my brain tingle. The same goes for all the different level mechanics like the stage transition cannons, the whirring of the propeller, or the rumble of the motorized yo-yo power-up. My absolute favorite sounds in the game are made when the yo-yo is zipping over water and the pitch changes in accordance with how fast it's spinning. Another really cool thing about the sound design is how the pacing of levels and interactive elements are often such that your actions line up with the soundtrack in fun ways. You can also see elements of some levels move to the beat of that zone's song. Speaking of this soundtrack, it's honestly one of the highlights of the game for me. Simply put, the music in this game fucking bops. I absolutely love almost every track except for the menu theme, which seems out of place in the same way that the box art does. That aside, however, I love the music in this game so much I've already bought the soundtrack, and you can certainly expect to hear some of the tracks in the background of this video and more in the future. Alright, with performance and presentation out of the way, let's get to how the game works. First off, Penny feels responsive and great to control right off the bat. She has a perfectly tuned sense of inertia to her movement, and she can double jump as well as wall hop from the very start. Where things get interesting is with the inclusion of her yo-yo, with which she can perform a variety of moves. For starters, she can throw it in any direction or twirl it around herself to attack. But what really makes it special are the movement abilities. At the heart of this is Penny's ability to ride the yo-yo like a little chariot that feels absolutely incredible to control. She can zip into the yo-yo chariot from the ground or air and charge it up in place like a Sonic spin dash. On top of that, she can swing from the yo-yo or grab a ledge with it, as well as use it to perform a sort of wall boost. As you can see, there's a lot of movement tech here to combine and play around with, which can take some getting used to at first. But much like Suicide Squad, once you get the hang of all your various movement options, they flow into each other brilliantly and deliver a satisfying sense of speed and inertia. What I really found great about this is how the game feels good to play even when you're still trying to figure things out. I wasn't really a huge fan of 2D Sonic as a kid because until you got better and learned the levels, they could feel quite slow and clumsy. I didn't understand this was intentional at the time, and that you were supposed to get better as you played and then go back through them much faster. Penny's is similar in that regard, but I personally feel that the devs found a perfect balance between making it fun for clumsy players and first-timers like myself, as well as incredibly satisfying to achieve desired high-speed sprint through a level that platforming fans and speedrunners will love. This is all made even more satisfying when paired with the absolutely amazing level layouts and mechanics. Now, the level design in Penny's is brilliant for a few reasons. The first being just how fun the different power-ups and level gimmicks are, as well as how seamlessly sections flow from one to the next. I especially like the pepper power-up that supercharges the yo-yo and turns it into an awesome little motorcycle. In particular, I loved level transitions that this power-up is used for and how perspective bending they could be. On top of that, I like how the devs included the upper route / lower route setup of a Sonic game, with the upper route generally favoring speed but being more demanding. However, the game does a great job at presenting both the simpler and more complicated route to even inexperienced players like myself. I was also surprised by just how much freedom exists within these levels. Most obstacles can be approached in a variety of ways, and finding the fastest and most efficient way to get over a hurdle or past an obstacle is really satisfying when you start to put together all of Penny's movement options. Even while learning, I would occasionally catch a rhythm and gain enough momentum for a cool moment that would show me the level from a different angle and hint at what's possible with more practice. For example, I found this great path over the top of a level on my first playthrough. Despite looking like I've gone out of bounds, it's pretty clear that's not the case on account of how perfectly spaced and oriented the area is relative to the lower part of the level. There's also cannons on top of the ledge in front of you to make it clear that it is a surface you can get to. Small aside, but on the topic of the game teaching the player and letting them learn on their own, the devs did a great job making it clear through how the enemy penguins are designed that they aren't meant to be fought, but rather avoided or skipped. They do this by making them relentless and tedious to kill, as well as by making their primary function to slow you down. Most players should be able to infer from this rather quickly that they're simply obstacles to your momentum. Since I struggled with recognizing the same thing in Sonic games as a kid, I think this is a smart way of communicating it to players of all ages, and I really appreciated it here. On to what is my absolute favorite thing about these levels, and that's how they're perfectly designed to facilitate going fast and creating skips. A big part of this comes down to what I'm going to call level lines, but if there is an actual game development term for this and any devs are watching, please let me know. Level lines are just what I'm calling the most straightforward path through a level as the crow flies. What you'll notice once you've come back to levels with a better sense of Penny's different movement options is that there's almost always a way to cut straight through a section with enough momentum and good play. This is great for helping players like myself identify places where we can come up with our own routes through a level without exclusively relying on more experienced players to find and show them to us. After seeing just a couple of skips for speedrunning the first level and getting them down, I was suddenly able to see tons of places where those same things I had learned led directly to an easy to follow level line. This made Penny's an absolute joy for me to play. For the first time, I'm seeing the appeal of time trials and speedrunning from the perspective of someone who now understands how satisfying it is to shave a few seconds off of a run. What makes it all possible is how the mechanics and level design come together to make going faster always feel as fun to play as it is impressive to watch. So having gone over how the game looks and plays, what's on offer here in terms of content? Well, to answer that, let's first quickly go over the game's structure and objectives. The game is split up into 11 different zones with multiple stages in each and a handful of fun boss fights spread throughout. Stages are timed and scored to incentivize getting collectibles and maintaining momentum. The boss fights are also rather fun, clever, and surprisingly challenging. They aren't super hard or anything, but I died a few times to 2 of them, which is more than I can say for any boss fight in Mario Odyssey. There's also time attack versions of every stage for those who want to do some speedrunning casually or otherwise. It took me just over 6 hours to play through Penny's Big Breakaway. However, I missed most of the collectibles and was focused on going fast over being thorough, since finding a flow and building momentum was my favorite part of the game. I'm also not very good at 3D platformers relative to other genres, so that certainly contributed to me avoiding or missing most collectibles. While the game might not sound terribly long, it is only $30 and in my opinion, well worth every penny. I also imagine most people who hop in to play it will either be more thorough than myself or likewise quickly drawn to the time attacks. In light of that, I'm confident you could easily get far more than just 6 or so hours out of it, and as for myself, I've played for another 4 hours messing around in time trials and plan to do so again in the future because it's just that much fun to play. I am not kidding when I say this is one of the best 3D platformers I've ever played, only beaten by Sackboy's Big Adventure. And I don't think that's a coincidence, as many of its elements seem to take direct inspiration from either Sackboy or its inspirations. While Sackboy and Penny play and control quite differently, they share a lot of DNA in how the levels are laid out and how collectibles are placed within them. They also both do a lot of fun things with character momentum as well as camera perspective. Sackboy is, however, slower, more puzzle-oriented, and has much higher production values that do contribute to the thoroughly wonderful experience of playing it. Now I'm sure some people are saying, but what about Mario Odyssey? And I don't know what to say other than it's alright. I'm not a big fan, and I don't think I need to throw shade at the games I don't enjoy to make my points about the ones I do, so I'll leave it at that. I also think they're very different styles of 3D platformer that don't really benefit from comparison. Back to Penny's though. This game is truly a remarkable feat of platforming design from an indie team making their own daring jump from 2D to 3D platformer. I believe Penny's Big Breakaway really is a wonderful and enthusiastic step forward for 3D platforming mechanics, and I have to thank everyone who had a hand in making it. I cannot wait to see what the team at Evening Star Studios make next because I have a feeling it's going to be rather ambitious. And if it's anywhere near as much fun to play as Penny's first outing, then you'll certainly be hearing about it from me when the time comes. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell if you want to be notified when my next video goes live. I also do variety game streaming 5 days a week starting at 12 PM Pacific Standard Time, which is where I capture my gameplay footage used in these videos and play through the games covered on this channel. Link to my Twitch channel, Discord, and Twitter in the description. Thanks again, and see you next time.